start. Good evening, people, citizens of Veridora, denizens of the interwebs that support Chasing Dissent. We love you all. We appreciate you coming along. And this, again, is our treat to you. Our treat. In that, young Ed here has decided to give you people the opportunity to see him first before anyone else. So, without any further ado, we shall go to the Montauk Project. Ed, how are you?
John, hello. How the hell are you?
I'm good,
Hello,
mate.
everybody. This is me. Nothing special, but I thought because I wanted to keep my anonymity for as long as possible, and you're still not going to find out my full name, so you'd have to do some proper hunting to find out who I am. And if you're that diligent, then you're welcome to the information.
There you go.
That's just as a treat for the subscribers and the people who keep Chasing Dissent going.
So, with that, a little bit of housekeeping, troll room. How's the audio? Can you hear both of us on a kind of equal footing?
It's hot. Damn hot. Real hot.
Amy says, yo, Ed, you're whiter than me.
I live in Northern Europe. What were you expecting? Some dark-skinned person? Fucking hell.
Thank you, Dread.
It's also the light.
Right. What are you drinking this evening, Ed? What do we have?
I am drinking a lovely bottle of Primitivo.
Yeah.
Which is a birthday present from an awake friend of mine who I was thinking, because he normally gets me a bottle of wine for my birthday, and he asked me to pop round after work, saying that he had a present for me. And Turned out to be 6 bottles of wine. So
and you went round with some trepidation, but it turned out
no,
okay.
not at all. No, because it's just I figured he'd gotten me a bottle of wine, which is really kind of him.
Yeah.
And he turned up with a box of 6.
Oh, that's all right. That's a result.
I'm winning.
Yeah, that's a result. That's fantastic. How
about you, John? What are you drinking?
I'm on this Highland Spring.
Okay.
Having a bit of
Water.
a detox, Ed. Apparently, I drank 17 pints on Saturday.
Well, that's standard for a Scotsman, isn't it?
Well, I thought it was barely acceptable. I mean, Vaughn went back to the B&B and went to bed. I ended up going out for more drinking, fish and chips, which was lovely.
I had dinner that night, so I came back here and got an hour and a half glorious kip, and then went out for a steak. So
yeah. Right, let's go for it, mate.
Cool.
You crack on.
Right.
You just tell me when you need the slides moved, and I'll move the slides. I'm in control of the slides tonight, people. I've got a task.
Let me. I've just realised I don't have a copy of the slides up for myself, so let me just pull that up so I can just monitor them, and then I'll know which one is which. So, Montauk Project. People have probably heard about this one. The TV series Stranger Things was actually originally going to be called Montauk, and so if you're a fan of that show, then a lot of the stuff in it kind of is on a theme. But the Montauk Project itself refers to a series of top secret experiments allegedly conducted at Camp Hero Air Force Station in Montauk, New York. And if you pop that first slide up, John, we've got a nice little view of the gigantic radar thingamadoodle. It's called a Sage, I think.
What, that big, the big dish thing?
Yeah, there's another slide. We'll come to that one in a minute.
Yeah.
But it's actually semi-automatic ground environment. That's what it's called.
Okay.
And it was in the 1970s and 80s that this supposedly happened. The experiments were supposed to have been carried out by the US government with the aim of developing psychological warfare techniques and exotic research, including time travel.
Mm-hmm.
The origins of the Montauk Project theories can be traced back to the Philadelphia experiment. And if you pop the next slide up. Montauk. Let's just go through where it is first.
All right. Okay.
We'll get to the Philadelphia experiment in a minute. Sorry, I meant to do that and forgot. So yeah, you can see on slide 2, the left-hand slide is the overall location. So it's kind of New York sort of area. And the right-hand slide shows you the exact, now it's not exactly an island. It's more kind of a peninsula type thing.
A promontory.
But it's, yeah, I mean, it is very, it may as well be split from the mainland. One thing to notice is, and I've got the bloody arrow in the wrong place, but just above that top arrow, you'll see something that says Plum Island.
Plum Island.
Now, yeah, and Plum Island deserves an entire rabbit hole.
Really?
In itself.
It's more than just the washed up carcass of what some say were a decomposing raccoon.
Well, the Montauk monster, but it was washed up on the beach near Camp Hero, but it's right across the frickin' water from Plum Island, and based on I think I remember seeing something that the currents could easily have carried it from Plum Island, right. And Plum Island was a US government secret research place where they did all sorts of genetic stuff and
biolab stuff.
Yeah, God knows what they created there.
Yeah.
So the Philadelphia experiment was an alleged attempt by the US Navy in 1943 to render a destroyer escort invisible to enemy detection. Now, according to some accounts, the experiment went awry and caused the ship to teleport from Philadelphia to New York and back again. And if you go to slide 4, you'll see the...
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's the distance that we're talking about.
So Philadelphia to Norfolk, not New York, Norfolk.
Was it? Did I put New York?
No, you said New York, but you
Oh, that's
have
because I'm a
properly
dickhead.
indicated Norfolk. So that's a fair hike, Philadelphia to Norfolk.
And especially, I mean, supposedly teleporting. And many of the crew members were supposed to have gone insane or disappeared. There are also reports that when the ship teleported back, there was people stuck in, like, embedded in the steel.
Yeah.
And for anyone that's interested, if you go to the next slide, there is quite an old but still quite a good movie called The Philadelphia Experiment, where you see some of the more gory details done in fairly old special effects.
Yeah.
Now, the thing about it is that in the 1980s, a man named Al Bielek, actually, USS Eldridge, just go to the next slide, slide 6, which is the ship.
Yeah.
And that was supposed, I chose one with a little bit of funkiness on it to make it a bit more interesting. But that's the USS Eldridge, which is supposedly the ship that was teleported.
So,
but most of what we know, and most of the stories about the Montauk project, come from a man called Al Bielek. And if you change the slide, sorry, who came forward claiming that he had repressed memories of working on the Montauk project. Bielek said that after the Philadelphia experiment ended in failure, research continued under the auspices of a shadowy government organization called the Phoenix Project. The work was later renamed the Montauk Project and relocated to Camp Hero in order to develop time travel and psychological warfare techniques.
My understanding of the Eldridge was that they were trying to use, was it some kind of electromagnetic frequencies or something to try and confuse radar and
it has to do with a lot of the Tesla sort of technology, electromagnetics, and trying to fold, because there are theories that you instead of going from A to B conventionally, you could fold the space between A and B and then cross that distance almost instantaneously.
Right.
And I mean, this is serious science that's been theorized by physicists and other such people that are far more intelligent than me. But Al Bielek is a bit of a... We'll come back to the people in a minute, because that's kind of where things get a bit interesting in terms of the story.
Yeah.
But Bielek came forward and claimed he had repressed memories of working on the project. And he said that after the Philadelphia, oh no, I've done that bit. Sorry. He described a 12-level underground base beneath Camp Hero containing a massive Tesla coil, which if you go on to the next slide, there's a cool picture of a cool, that was used to bend time and space. He also claimed that boys were kidnapped and sent through the portal into another dimension. Those who returned purportedly had their minds altered through torture, psychic driving, and other experimental methods intended to fracture their sanity and create detached humans who could be sent out on missions. Ring any bells?
Yeah.
So there's two. This is the thing about Montauk. There's two aspects of it. There's the kind of weird science sort of experiments, and then there's the MK Ultra mind control stuff. And yeah, I mean, the people, the boys who returned had their minds completely altered through just essentially was to try and create Manchurian candidate type people.
Yeah.
Now, according to Bielek, yeah, absolutely, yeah, and it's been a long held aim of people like the CIA and stuff to try and create perfectly programmed humans that can do a mission and then not even remember that they've done it, or do a mission and then actually kill themselves afterwards rather than be captured.
Yeah.
And it's really dark. I mean, some of the experiments they did in the 60s with LSD and stuff like that, I mean, there are people that jumped out of freaking windows and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's really dark stuff. But according to Bielek, John von Neumann, who's quite a famous mathematician and physicist, was director of the Montauk Project. And he'd worked on the Manhattan Project as well. Bielek stated that the technology used at Montauk was based on alien equipment that had been given to the US government in exchange for permission to abduct humans for breeding purposes. So there's also alien shit in there. Now, just as a side note, I figured that John von Neumann, being quite a famous person, that there might be some sort of indication, even holidaying in like that sort of area, or having a house there or something like that.
Yeah.
But I couldn't find any connections between von Neumann and Camp Hero or Long Island or the Montauk Project. I mean, von Neumann spent his whole career in places like Princeton, and advanced military facilities. I mean, like I said, he worked on the Manhattan Project, so he was probably involved in some top secret kind of stuff. And one thing that kind of gives it away a bit is that von Neumann died in 1957, and the Montauk Project supposedly took place in the 1960s, according to Bielik and other people.
Right.
So we have a problem that you can't have dead guys being director of your project.
That's true.
That's true.
However, see this guy Bielik, right?
Yeah.
What's he to the project? Do we think he's running it, or?
Well, this is the thing, that there's no evidence of it. There's no evidence that the only stuff that we know about it, a lot of these stories come from Al Bielik and another guy called Preston Nichols, who we'll come to in a little while.
Yeah.
And Preston Nichols is he's even more vocal about the whole thing and even more dodgy.
Well, he's got some really strange stories, though, hasn't he?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And there's another guy called Steven Swerdlow, who, again, I mean, Swerdlow's been on TV quite a lot, talking about it. And they've got some wacky stories. I mean, they don't have any... There's no evidence.
No,
there's no
evidence.
I mean, there are people that I think, I'm not sure if Amy's in the channel, but she's posted some... she's posted some interesting stuff about Montauk. Amy, by the way, I'm not going there. No, fuck that.
Well, actually,
just for the record.
I mean, I don't know if you want me to bring it up at the end, but I was reading something today on it, and I was just going to read out what this guy said about it because he's been there. But
well, why don't do it now?
Right. Okay. So what? This is it was a. Actually, we'll see it here. So I'm not going to move around because then it'll just screw up the slides. But fellow Long Islanders, he says, go there. I went there 2 decades ago out of curiosity and was followed the entire time. Many areas are restricted with red letter signs, and maybe Amy can back this up, right? You can't even get close to the buildings with the giant radio dish. The place is absolutely still being run. Their tactic was to call it decommissioned and keep it running, just move it underground. They don't expect people to treat it as a park to camp out. Well, because there is nothing to do there, and you see unmarked SUVs following you. Sounds a bit like Area 51. Even if you're just taking photos and adhering to their signs. There are vents everywhere leading underground and bunkers everywhere. There used to be a town there where people lived, abandoned homes that looked like they were built in the 50s. You really can't go anywhere. Just don't be stupid and pass any of the many restricted area. If it was decommissioned, they wouldn't monitor people who visit and close everything off. This guy didn't see alien activity, but I saw a huge, perfectly round circle of dead flat grass surrounded by luscious green grass. I found that odd and took a photo. Then the SUV showed up, tailgated us with no license plate tag, and I figured it best to head home. I overstayed my welcome, but it was a thrill, and at that time I had no knowledge of the history of this place at all. I mean, it's interesting. It's nice of the chap to put that into the comments section of that video.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's little tidbits. It's a really fascinating story because there are. And
Amy does say it's like Area 51. You can't get in. She's and I believe she's been there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, she said she had on Twitter. Now, one of the things that's supposedly in this alleged underground facility
No,
is something called the...
Sorry, I'm still on the slide of Dr. John von Neumann.
No, that's fine.
Right, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, no, let's stick with von Neumann at the moment. Actually, no, go to the next one, because the Sage radar equipment is they sort of, they reckon that it kind of, because supposedly there's this Montauk chair.
Yes.
That the Montauk boys who have had their minds altered are able to sit in, and supposedly the reason that they had the Montauk, they were looking for these Montauk boys, is that they were trying to find kids that were somehow sensitive to this chair. And supposedly it had electronic and crystalline components that allowed operators to manifest objects, manipulate the minds of subjects, and bend time. Preston Nichols, just go on to the next slide, because this
sounds like a conglomeration of stuff between like Stargate. Do you remember the chair they found under the Antarctic and the Stargate series, and you know, the
chair that controlled the alien weapons platform,
and the movie Doom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with the jump site to Mars.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. I mean, there are chairs that feature in sci-fi of different descriptions. Now, Preston Nichols, who, if you pop the next slide open, you'll see a picture of.
We've got a picture of 11 at the moment, and MK Ultra.
No, we want 12. Yeah. Pop 12
Preston
open.
Nichols, we've got him. He's He's nearly in as good a shape as I said.
Although he's much less creepy, he's much more creepy looking than both of us put together.
Definitely, mate.
And he's an odd character, because similarly to Al Bielek, he's one of the main people that claims to have been a part of this Montauk project. Mm-hmm. But he's also, I mean, he claimed to have recovered repressed memories about working as an engineer on the project. And he said that the chair essentially amplified psychic powers in order to alter reality. Now, according to theories, children were kidnapped, subject to torture in order to intentionally fracture their minds and create multiple personalities that could be manipulated. Survivors and mind control victims known as Montauk boys began coming forward in the late 1980s with allegations of abuse. Stuart Sverdlow, who's on slide 13, claims to be one such Montauk boy who had his mind shattered through trauma-based experiments before being recruited to operate the Montauk chair. Sverdlow says he was able to manifest objects, manipulate time, and alter the minds of the people in the Montauk facility. Other Montauk boys include Duncan Cameron and Andy Pirro, both of whom told similar stories of kidnap, trauma, mind control, psychic abilities unleashed by the experiments. Now, Preston Nichols, if you just pop him back.
So who was the guy who claimed his father worked there?
Oh.
Was that one of these guys?
I think it is, but I'm not sure which one.
I think who was the guy that was on Coast to Coast? Was that Preston Nichols? You know, the Art
It was
Bell
either
thing?
him or I think it was either him or Stuart Sverdlow.
Yeah.
But there's another guy called Duncan Cameron, who's also there's 3 or 4 of these guys that have supposedly been, and Preston Nichols also claimed to be able to deprogram them.
Right.
So it's
but
bizarre.
Programming was a bit dodgy, was it not?
Well, yeah, because the deprogramming involved the person who's being deprogrammed being in some sort of aroused state, and then Preston Nichols had to touch them in a certain way. And the boys who went through this, or the young men who went through this, the reports are that they always came out of the whole thing with a very odd expression on their faces. And you just, I kind of,
oh my God.
I know, I sort of hightailed it out of the freaking rabbit hole at that
it's
point.
Like, put a toilet roll in the fridge, please.
It's honestly, it's craziness. Now, it's there are many reasons to doubt, because despite I'm not saying that there isn't potentially an underground base there,
Yeah.
because actually as a location it makes quite a lot of sense because it's quite secluded. But it's and there's clearly still something going on there, because if there wasn't, then they wouldn't be investing in all of the security and things like that. But there's no really compelling evidence. But that's, I mean, if there was evidence, I wouldn't be surprised if said evidence ended up.
It's right there in your face as well. You know, it's right there. I mean, that's a Hamptons just across the water, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's an area full of rich people.
Yeah.
So who knows what kind of
rich people tend to keep themselves to themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I mean, according to the military, Camp Hero was officially shut down as a military installation in 1969.
Yeah.
Which was before the Montauk project supposedly even began. There are also no records that support the key plot points mentioned by Bielik, Nichols, and Cameron, along with others. The source of nearly all the Montauk project allegations can be traced back to three individuals: Preston Nichols, Al Bielik, and Stuart Svedlow, all of whom claim to have recovered repressed memories about their involvement. But repressed memory therapy has been called into question and is not generally accepted within mainstream psychology. There are also lots of horror stories about repressed memories where hypnotherapists have led their client, and the client has then remembered abuse, and that abuse, then people get prosecuted, and it's kind of ruined lives as well. Yeah. And I'm not saying there isn't some validity to it.
Well, in some cases, it turns out the abuse never happened.
Absolutely, and it's one of those things that the person doing the hypnosis has to be the right sort of person, if you understand what I mean.
I think the problem with memory, Ed, is that it is so fallible, and we all tend to remember things the way we want to remember things, and you know, people can easily convince themselves that something did happen to them or didn't happen to them, you know, and you'd be surprised how convinced they are, and even when you show them evidence that that's not what happened, you know, this actually did happen to you or it didn't happen to you. You know, they can't, you know, the cognitive dissonance is too strong because they've really brainwashed themselves.
Yeah, it's like you get brainwashed into believing that something that didn't happen to you actually happened. But again, it's very difficult to tell. This is one of the things about Montauk that I find really fascinating, because there's also so little of it. I mean, there's a few of these Montauk boys. It sounds like it was a really big project, and there was a lot more than 4 of these Montauk boys. So you would think that other people might have come forward, especially with Preston Nichols and Stuart Svedlow and stuff being so vocal about it, because I mean, they've been on TV and they've been on some of these mainstream rabbit hole shows, the inferior ones. And you'd think that someone else would come forward, but they haven't. And I mean, critics of the repressed memory therapy argue that the so-called repressed memories are often nothing more than fantasies or false memories unintentionally planted by therapists.
Yeah.
As an example, Preston Nichols suddenly recalled his suppressed Montauk memories after visiting a hypnotherapist in the late 1980s. Bielik similarly remembered his role in the project after emerging from decades of substance abuse and hazy memories in 1988.
Well, that might just have been part of the project.
So it's not this. We're not talking about massively stable individuals here.
Yeah.
Hey,
and
obviously,
60s,
I mean,
man.
if you've been put through exactly, and precisely, and I mean, if you had been put through those sorts of experiments when you're really young, then that is going to have all kinds of side effects and repercussions. But I mean, Bielik also remembered his role in the project. No, hang on, that's the next bit. It's you just can't, especially if the person is coming off substance abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you can have all sorts of things, hallucinations, paranoid delusions.
Yeah.
Depending on the substance and the amount of time you've been addicted to it. Coming off it can cause all kinds of mental issues.
Yeah.
Now, it's actually we're getting through this quicker than I'd planned because we're not that far away from. We've got a little bit to go. So Preston Nichols was. Could you pop his slide number 12 back up for me?
Yeah, of course I can.
Because he was one that I kind of focused on a bit, mainly because I thought his pictures were super creepy. I couldn't find a single non-creepy picture of the guy. There's just something about his face that I don't know.
What's all the? Is there any mention of all the equipment in the background?
No, I've tried to. I tried to identify them, but the pictures, trying to find pictures of for a presentation on the Montauk project is really quite difficult.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it is TV stills and pictures of Camp Hero and stuff like that. There's nothing. I mean, there's a few pictures of the underground bunkers. I'm not sure if I put. No, I didn't. They're not very good because they could be anywhere. It's kind of thin on the ground. Now let's look at Preston Nichols for a minute. He claimed to have helped deprogram Montauk boys like Stuart Svedlow, who was supposedly part of the Montauk Project experiments, but there's no evidence Nichols had any psychological credentials or experienced with dealing with deprogramming techniques.
Right.
Accounts of how he supposedly deprograms Svedlow are very vague and questionable. The process apparently involved recalling repressed memories, which, as noted earlier, is highly controversial and unreliable. Nichols was associated for a time with the Psychic Investigations Organization, and they conduct paranormal research and ghost hunting and that kind of thing. And well, not ghost hunting, but looking for mediums and remote viewers and people like that.
Yeah.
But there are also people who accuse the group of promoting dubious theories. Now, one person's dubious theory is another person's good idea. So one has to take a lot of the debunking with as much salt as the actual theories, but you've got to cover all of the bases. Now, several Montauk boys like Svedlow and Duncan Cameron actually distanced themselves from Nichols and raised questions about some of the things that he was claiming and some of the methods that he used.
Yeah.
There's no documented evidence of the Montauk boys themselves prior to when Nichols and others began making claims about them. There's no missing children cases or legal investigations or police reports or anything like that that match the allegations and the sort of time periods where these guys would have been of an age to be kidnapped and in the sort of area and stuff. There's nothing there. There's which you would think that if there was a big project that was picking children up and trying to use them for this project, that I don't know. I mean, somehow maybe there would be more of them. I mean, obviously children go missing, but back in the 70s and 80s, I'm not sure that it was quite at epidemic levels as it is now.
So I remember, I remember listening to the Coast to Coast stuff, and it was quite mental because, and I'm just touching on some of what's his name, Preston Nichols' book here, right? And it's a bit extreme, but we've got things like, the experiments began in earnest in the early 70s, and during this time, some or all of the following are claimed to have occurred at the site. Homeless people were abducted and subjected to huge amounts of electromagnetic radiation. Few survived. People had their psychic abilities enhanced to the point where they could materialise objects out of thin air. Stuart Swerdlow claims to have been involved in this. He says his psionic abilities were boosted, but at the cost of emotional stability. And then experiments were conducted in teleportation. And the one that got me was that one of them had claimed that he claimed that his dad worked at the project and his dad took him along as a subject and trained him up on it. Right?
I just can't remember the name of the person, because I think it is one of the ones that we've mentioned, like maybe Duncan Cameron or someone like that.
Yeah, and I remember he said he went back in time. There was a group of them. There was 3 or 4 of them, he said, and what they used to do is they used to go back in time to specific events to try and influence things. And one of them was like the signing of the what was it, the end of the Civil War or something, you know, when Abraham Lincoln was there and all that. And he said at one point he was there and he saw himself, right, because he'd been sent back that many times that he was starting to trip over himself. And then then they'd had things like, to come back, though, it didn't rely on the sending station to send you back. You had to be brought back by some kind of device that they had. And some of the boys lost it. And so they're stuck in time. And in the 1800s or whatever it was, right? And then he said one time it went wrong for him, and instead of going back to Montauk, he came out in Arizona in the middle of the desert, right? And he said they wandered, there was 3 of them, and they wandered about for like 3 days before they got picked up and taken to the nearest military base, where they were then flown back to Montauk. I mean, this guy has some stories, I'll tell you, and it just sounds crazy. And then, of course, he goes on about the jump chair when they went to Mars.
Yeah, I didn't cover that. It was too
esoteric for you,
out there. Yeah, I also couldn't find stuff, anything that actually made a huge amount of sense to me.
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the Montauk project, and you kind of have to pick and choose a little bit.
Yeah.
But the Mars stuff, because I've watched a couple of the videos with Steven Sverdlow that you can find online, and it's almost, I don't know. It had a ring of well, I mean, it had a ring of BS about it.
Let me read this part out and tell me if you think it sounds like something that we may have watched on TV recently, right? A porthole in time was created which allowed researchers to travel anywhere in time or space. This was developed into a stable time tunnel. Contact was made with alien extraterrestrials through the time tunnel, and technology was exchanged with them which enhanced the project and allowed broader access to hyperspace. Right? An alien monster travelled through the time tunnel, destroyed equipment and devoured researchers. The tunnel was shut down and the creature destroyed. What is that? So that's the plot of Stranger Things.
Well, there's exactly. But I mean, there was another story where when they were using the chair, that one of the boys opened some kind of portal and let some sort of demon monster type thing through.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's people that have been onto the base, I don't know when, and supposedly been down one level, which you can get into from the main structure, and seen scratches on the walls, and alleging that it looks like people literally just ran really quickly. But again, it's
it's all hearsay.
Who knows?
There's nothing to back
exactly.
it up. But that's the problem with many of these rabbit holes, because they are all hearsay. You know, many of them you never get to to an end point, because it's usually on the word of one person, and either that person's
also
disappeared or dead by this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's also what makes it interesting, because I'm not. Sometimes the journey is the whole point, and once you get to the destination, you're just looking for another journey again.
Yeah.
And it's the process of finding out. But some of the rabbit holes they just make more logical sense, like the JFK assassination, the Diana assassination,
like faking the moon landing.
Faking the moon landings. There's, I mean, even faking the moon landings. There's one of the guys that we covered on that, Bart Sibrel, who was the guy that he's a filmmaker that was punched in the face by Buzz Aldrin. And he's one of those characters that he doesn't do himself a lot of favors in terms of his style of delivery.
No, he doesn't. Abrasive.
But exactly. But there's so many different aspects of that, which once you put them all together, you come away with the inescapable conclusion that something's not right. And if something's not right, it means it didn't happen the way we're told it happened.
Yeah.
With Montauk, it's much more difficult because the characters involved, particularly Preston Nichols. I mean, Stuart Sverdlow, he comes across as someone that believes his own BS somehow.
Yeah.
Whereas Preston Nichols comes across as genuinely creepy and not the sort of person that I would want to have looking after children.
But you know what? Yeah, I'm 100% behind you. But if you've been abused as a child, right, which these guys are claiming to have been, and let's just say it's not beyond the bounds of possibility for your own government to have experimented on its own citizens, because we have proven that on a number of occasions. For instance,
that's like
like the underground chemical trials and spreading
Tuskegee
stuff.
experiment.
The Tuskegee experiment. So these are all proven, and it's not beyond possibility that it could be severely damaged goods. From that point of view.
Exactly. Yeah, precisely. I mean, it could be true. It couldn't. It could not be true. I mean, I do try and maintain a healthy dose of skepticism when I do these, and try and look at it from both sides. And in some cases, like the JFK assassination, you just look at the other side and you just think, no, it's all bullshit. Sorry, you're telling us lies. This is nonsense. Whereas with Montauk, it's much more difficult in a way that's actually what I think maybe one of the reasons that the Montauk project is so interesting is because it does throw up those kinds of questions, because it's not, I mean, even the Diana assassination or 7/7 when we did that one, you've got things like CCTV cameras not working and all this kind of thing. And there's a whole trail of breadcrumbs that inevitably leads you to the conclusion that the official story is nonsense. But with this one, I mean, we've got people claiming psychic powers, time manipulation, the Philadelphia experiment.
There's a bit of the old men who stare at goats in this as well, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. It's what you said a little while ago about it, like it's when we were talking about the chair, where it's almost like it's a plot from some
sci-fi
TV
movie
series, or a combination of different ones. But then you could also say, well, maybe the sci-fi movies got their ideas from some of these stories.
See, that's the thing. I mean, how much of, I mean, you look at the sci-fi movies and you see things like, they were talking about stealth aircraft and things like that well before we got to know that stealth aircraft existed. So
absolutely. And
I mean, to look at Arthur Clarke, he supposed to have dreamed up the idea of satellites, and suspiciously, like 3 years later, we had our first satellite.
And then we've got the Black Knight satellite. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes, I have heard of that.
Just as a little tangent. We covered that in our UFO one, didn't we?
Yeah, we kind of touched on it. I mean, and that's a complete unknown as well. I mean, Does it exist or
Absolutely.
doesn't it? It's like,
Well, there's pictures of it.
yeah, right.
I mean, that was because I did. If you do a Google search on Google Images for Black Knight satellite, you'll come up with some very odd looking black shapes, supposedly in space. Who knows? I mean,
it's NASA. Never a straight answer.
absolutely. But I mean, yeah, going back to Montauk, there's just too many. There's too few people telling too many stories that are impossible to prove, and just seem really far fetched.
So,
and I'm
so the litmus test I always tend to try and apply to these things is who benefits from these stories, right? So
the people claiming that it happened to them,
if they're benefiting from it, then yeah, it's more than likely that it's maybe a load of BS. But
that's the thing.
But secondly, if there was a project ongoing, does it benefit the project for them who look like this, right, to be out there purporting these wild stories? It's a bit like Project Blue Book, you know. You know, they're seeing highly developed aircraft that we've got on a secret list, and we'll just say, yeah, that's a UFO. You know.
Absolutely. I mean, it's you don't know where these stories have come from. I mean, going back to what you're saying about Cui Bono, all of these guys, Bielik, Nichols, they've all made money. I mean, Preston Nichols has only had online shops, and they've sold books, and they give speeches to like psychic conferences and all that kind of thing. So they've definitely had a financial interest in the whole thing. I mean, as far as I struggle with them. I really do, because when you research these rabbit holes, you watch videos of people and you listen to what they say, and over time you develop. I call them my conspiracy hairs. I have these little hairs on the back of my neck that start tingling when there's a conspiracy. Whenever I'm near a conspiracy theory, or if I watch something on the news, that sometimes it's just like a spidey sense or something like that, and it's just like, nope, there's something. And I had that with what happened a few years ago. I had it with 9/11. I had it when Diana was killed. And I don't get that with these guys from Montauk. I mean, the project itself, the fact that, yes, there's Camp Hero. Yes, they've got a giant radar dome. I wouldn't be surprised if there's underground tunnels, because that's one of the things that the military also do. But there are also other reasons why one might build an underground facility. But there's no proof. But then again, there's no proof that it didn't happen. And there's a lot of people that have been around that area and swear down that there's something going on. And so you can't discount that at all. And I mean, there's loads. There's actually quite a lot of stories of people, not necessarily who've been actually into Camp Hero, but are just curious and have gone to that area just to have a look around. And their stories are actually fairly consistent about being followed around and being left under no illusions that you should not go in there because bad things will happen. But there's all sorts of reasons that the military might do that as well. And I mean, there are definitely, for example, Preston Nichols, he was actually a science fiction author. And the stories that he wrote had very similar themes to what he ended up claiming were actual memories.
So he's got books on Amazon. He's got the Montauk Project, Experiments in Time, Montauk Revisited, Adventures in Synchronicity, The Music of Time, book 5 in the Montauk series, right? Pyramids of Montauk, Explorations in Consciousness, Encounter in the Pleiades, An Inside Look at UFOs, book 4 of the Montauk series. Yeah, so we have the Montauk series, the Kindle edition.
And I mean, Al Bielek is not credible either. I mean, he's made varying claims about his age, his birthplace, his education, employment history, and he's just if someone is making up lots of stories about who they are and what they've done, to me that's instant credibility loss. And then if you're also making money from it, that one just adds the air of a con man to it. And then Sverdlow, who's also been accused of embellishing his credentials and doing a lot of what the other ones did, which is blend a lot of science fiction with theories. And I mean, this is also the 70s and 80s. It's almost the dawn of proper science fiction. I mean, we had Star Wars, we had Star Trek, we had E.T., we had there was so much sci-fi back then.
There was.
That it was very much part of the zeitgeist.
And there was so many other, shall we say, what would you call them? I don't want to use the D word. You know, there was just things that maybe enhanced people's cognition or lack of it.
Well, yeah. I mean, who knows? I mean, that could be legal ones, illegal ones. Too many mushrooms.
Yeah.
Too much acid. Who knows? I mean, I've seen people do all sorts of crazy shit when they're on drugs before. But there's also, I mean, part of the issue that I've got is actually into some of the science as well.
Yeah.
And there's glaring technical inaccuracies regarding supposedly the time travel and mind manipulation technology described by the Montauk Project witnesses. The technical details are often nonsensical, completely unworkable according to scientists and engineers. And get this,
right.
There was actually...
But until they've actually done time travel, I can't understand how they can say that's unworkable because, let's face it.
Well, it's like with...
If I was on the show last night and I did a little bit on physics. Physics is falling apart because they've now got to the point where theoretical physicists are just making shit up, and now particle physicists are making shit up to fit their theories. So real science is falling apart. I mean, even Michio Kaku says that the cosmology is off by like a figure of 10 to the 120th power because the gap between their understanding and what actually is going on is so disparate that they just don't have a clue. This is the problem.
Yeah. Well, and it's the same with things like genetics as well. It's one of the reasons why some of the experiments that are happening around all sorts of different things in things like genetics, I find those really quite frightening because you can't mess with things that you don't understand, and you absolutely can't mess with chaotic systems. And it's chaos theory. There's a branch of mathematics called chaos theory. It involves fractal geometry, things like that. And one of the things about chaotic systems, think of chaotic system as the way that water drips out of a tap.
Yep.
If you hold a spoon under that drip, the drip is going to, you can't predict mathematically which way the water is going to end up rolling off the spoon because there's too many variables to take into account because it's a chaotic system. Same with the weather. There's another chaotic system.
Yeah.
And they're inherently unpredictable. They're inherently uncontrollable. And when an arrogant human comes along and says, "Oh, I understand this," when they really don't, and starts mucking around with it,
like putting shit in the air to try and change things.
Oh yeah, absolutely, dumping masses of radioactive whatever in the frickin' Pacific Ocean. No, it's fine. It's been fact checked. It's perfectly safe. No.
Yeah.
10 years later, Godzilla comes out of the bloody ocean and flattens Tokyo.
Yeah.
Which actually would be kind of fun. Well, maybe not Tokyo. They could do Washington.
Yeah.
But it's...
Yeah. No, humans are incredibly arrogant. You're right. We really are.
Absolutely. I mean, and here, going back to Montauk, get this. The USS Eldridge, there's no evidence that it was ever at Philadelphia Naval Yard.
No, I don't think there is.
And I mean, it's a real ship, but there's absolutely no evidence that it was ever at Philadelphia. Yeah. And there's absolutely no evidence that it was equipped with any kind of cloaking technology or any kind of secret military thing.
Did they not paint it? Not funny.
Well, to be honest, I think that's even in the days before the stealth coatings. I mean, because those coatings are highly toxic, but I'm not sure off the top of my head when they were developed. I mean, I imagine it's probably a lot earlier than we're told.
Yeah, probably. Well,
but I only remember. Yeah, I mean, I first remember hearing the word stealth technology back in the early 90s at the first invasion of Iraq.
Yeah.
When I was still at school and completely, totally not awake at all. And I just found that the 24-hour CNN coverage absolutely fascinating. I was completely glued to the television for a couple of weeks watching this whole thing unfold, and it was almost like science fiction meets warfare. And this is actually in the days that I still believed that America was the shining city on the hill and kind of was the good guys, and that there were such things as good guys and bad guys and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's so, yeah, I mean, stealth, that was late 90s. So if you think they'd maybe been developing that sort of tech since, I don't know, 70s, 80s, well, I mean, maybe.
Look at the SR-71. When was that built? That was late 60s, early 70s. They started coming up.
But was that, did that have stealth coating?
No, but it could go. Well, yeah, it kind of did.
Well, it was radar absorbing paint, effectively.
And it could really shift.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, but it's also, the thing about the SR-71 is that it's actually a really good looking plane as well.
Yeah,
you look at it and you just think, that is freaking fast.
It looks like something that Batman would have in his lair, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, well, you never know. It's probably the guy who designed it is probably a bit of a Batman fan. I mean, going back to Montauk again, so we've got all sorts of inaccuracies and stuff in the science. We've got no evidence that the ship that they said was in Philadelphia was ever in Philadelphia. The camp has been investigated, supposedly, and found to contain no underground tunnels or secret chambers. But I've also seen footage of lots of what look like grates or manholes or whatever dotted around the area. So that's not to say that there is no evidence at all.
Yeah, I think the only thing that leans me towards something going on there is the level of security. Pardon me. It just seems to be so high.
Well, that raises questions for sure. I mean, officially in 1992, the state of New York appropriated funds to Camp Hero for preservation and development after finding the abandoned military base contained no hidden or secret areas. But then preservation and development doesn't look particularly preserved and developed. It looks like it's just a ramshackle falling to pieces military base. But then why have all the security? I mean, if you think about it, that particular area, it's like you said, it's not that far away from the Hamptons. You would think that if you have this, exactly. I mean, you've got rich people from New York could build multi-million-dollar houses there,
Yeah.
and take the kids there for the summer and stuff. So that's actually, I hadn't thought of that before. Which, when you add to the security, it does suggest that there is something happening there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So, but maybe, I don't know, maybe it's an underground facility. They've just decided to store a bunch of documents or something like that. It could be literally anything. But it's also the thing. Yeah. But the thing with Montauk Project is it's also almost classic X-Files. And I mean, I'm a huge fan of the X-Files. I was in the 90s.
I loved them.
And I still am. And if you've seen the remastered 1080p upscaled version of the X-Files, it's actually one of the best that they did of the old series. It's really, really good.
Oh, I'll have a look.
Especially if you watch it on a big 4K TV.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the other tip is if you go onto a search engine and you search for IMDb playlist of X-Files Alien Story Arc, you'll get a really handy-dandy list of the episodes that comprise the most interesting part of the series.
Cool. Sounds good.
But yeah, Montauk, so it combines paranoia, mind control experiments.
Do we want to look at the little doggy?
Oh yeah, there we go. The Montauk monster. Now, that's an actual picture of a creature that washed up on the beach at Montauk. I put Plum Island ? In there because, as I mentioned at the start of the show, there is geographical proximity between Plum Island and Montauk. So, is that something? Is it a?
So what is it?
Well, it looks like it's kind of got a beak almost.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an artist. If you look at slide 15, there's an artist's kind of recreation of what it might have looked like. And it's, my first thought is someone's tried to cross a chicken and a pig or a dog or something.
Adam says it could be a badger. He says, I've seen decomposed ones that look a bit like that. Right, so, but the problem I've got, Adam, right, and when we look at this, is it's not that decomposed, okay? It doesn't have any hair on it, but it's not that decomposed, right? And the other question that one has to ask oneself, if it's been in the water so long, why has nothing else eaten it?
Well,
because you know what, you put stuff in the water and fish eat it.
Yep.
Yeah. So why has nothing eaten it?
It's not. I mean, it doesn't even look like anything's had a nibble.
Yeah, exactly. It looks fairly pristine. So I can understand the hair disappearing, right? But I don't understand why nothing's had a go at it. It's even
agreed.
It even appears to still have eyes, which are the first things to go. And why is it not covered in flies?
Well, that's another good question, because even if something like that washed up on the beach, if it was a fish, I mean, you only have to see, I don't know, roadkill. There's always covered in flies and insects, because that's Mother Nature's way of breaking the thing down.
Yeah, Mother Nature's recyclables.
Yeah, and Mother Nature didn't want to...
Yeah, look at this tail, Adam. That's not a badger tail. That's quite a long tail. Quite a long, thick tail. I don't think badgers have got that big a tail, do they?
No. And they also, badgers don't... Their legs aren't quite as long.
No.
And they're also... They just... I don't know what the badger looks like once you take all the fur off, but... That just they don't have beak-like. I mean, they've got kind of a more sort of canine-y type snout.
Well, badgers in the bear family, isn't it? It's the same as a dog. They're all in that same kind of canids or whatever you call them, or canids.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But as you pointed out, John, the fact that this thing's not been munched on at all,
Yeah,
and it hasn't. It's bizarre.
it does
Absolutely
look a bit bizarre.
bizarre.
I'll give you that. It does
But
look bizarre.
there's nothing about Montauk that isn't bizarre.
Indeed.
I mean, the stories are bizarre. Some of the people involved are bizarre. It's fascinating. Let me just have a quick look, because Amy posted a bunch of stuff. I don't know, because I'm pretty much at the end of my presentation, so
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone who's listening has got anything to add, anything I got wrong.
Any questions? Amy
Any
seems
questions?
to have dropped off. She's probably had another goat emergency.
I mean, it's absolutely fascinating rabbit hole. It really is. And I thoroughly enjoyed researching it. It's just one that you really have to have your head screwed on properly when you're researching it, because it's very. Some of these guys, like particularly Stephen Sverdlow, he's a really good storyteller.
Yeah.
And he's, I mean, it doesn't necessarily, he sort of carries you along with the narrative. And if you're not being skeptical and you're kind of looking at what he's saying from multiple directions, it's very easy to get sucked down the rabbit hole and end up actually buying into too much of this stuff, where you just need to keep, whenever you're exploring rabbit holes, you have to stay agnostic and you have to stay skeptical to a certain extent, and you can get to absolutely, you have to stay grounded, and you can get to a point with something, say for example where I'm at with JFK, where I don't just think that the official story is nonsense. I think that anyone who still believes the official story is a huge part of the problem that we've got in this world today. And I know but there are still people who do, because I've had conversations with them in the past.
Yeah.
And it's just that blank. I mean, I'm sure, especially after the last 3 years, that everyone listening to this must know what I'm talking about, where you're talking to someone, you're talking to a normie, for lack of a better word, and you're trying to kind of push them down the fucking rabbit hole. And this blank wall goes up, and they start. It's really weird, because you can feel this energetic disconnection almost. It's like, if you think of things in terms of energy, and we're all beings of energy rather than matter, because matter is just energy slowed down to a slower vibration. But you get an energetic connection with people, and sometimes it's a good one. Sometimes you're really drawn to them, and sometimes you're really repelled by them. But that blankness, where it's almost like a switch goes off, and that person is just not engaging with you anymore. You can see it's that expression, the lights are on but nobody's home. Yeah.
So a couple of questions from the chat. One, Julie.
Sure.
Julie says, any good documentaries on this, Ed? Well, and you particularly recommend?
Yes, there is one that I recommend, which is a YouTube channel. Let me link it. I'll link it to you on Twitter.
Okay.
Because this is also for rabbit hole explorers. This is an absolutely fabulous channel. AJ does.
Badge, rabbit hole explorers.
That's a nice idea. I like that.
I've been down Ed's rabbit hole.
No, let's not.
Now, you couldn't walk about Brighton wearing that, could you?
You always have to go there, don't you?
Yeah, of course I do.
Oh my
of course I do.
Word. I tell you what, audience, for those of you who've never been out drinking with this Scotsman, you should do it, but just make sure that you've got a decent alcohol tolerance. But we did have a lot of fun. At the weekend, but that's not the sort of thing I could do every week. No, not anymore.
No, definitely not. So when, and the other question was, when is your birthday?
My birthday is on Sunday.
Sunday coming up.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yes, I should be hitting the half century.
Boom.
Which yeah, it's I was my 40th was not a good birthday at all because I split up as well. The night before my 40th birthday, I found out that my ex, that my girlfriend was cheating on me, and I booted
Nice.
her out of the flat.
The night
And that
before
was
your
at
40th birthday.
yeah, it was literally at about quarter to midnight, and we'd had a massive row. And I'd stormed off into the bedroom just to do what you have to do when you're having a massive row sometimes with someone, where particularly if you're a bloke, you can get to a point where you're angry enough that something stupid might happen if you're not in control,
Yeah.
and you have to leave the situation
Yep.
rather than
You remove
um
yourself from the
you,
situation.
precisely. And I was sitting in the bedroom, and I had my back. I was actually sitting on the floor with my back to the door because the bedroom door has a crappy lock.
Mm-hmm.
And but because of that position, I could actually hear her talking to someone on the phone. And I heard the words, "Our secret's out," and I just lost the plot, and I literally frog marched her the fuck out of the flat.
Wow.
And yeah, and then 15 minutes later, I was 40, and it's yeah, it wasn't a good birthday, but actually, that whole experience, just to end the story on a positive note, I actually had a holiday booked, and we'd booked it, paid for it before we split up, and I'd done the online check-in and everything, but that meant I couldn't change it. I had two options: not go,
Go or go.
or go on my own. And I agonized about it for a good month and a half.
Oh, I thought you were going to say 20 minutes. But
No. It was literally a month and a half of driving my friends and family crazy about not knowing what I should do, and
should I
not
go
just
or should I stay now?
to be honest, just being terrified of going on my own.
Yeah.
And in the end, I bit the bullet, and I just went. And getting there, because this was my first trip to Dahab in Egypt, which is one of my spiritual homes, and it was also the holiday where I first learned scuba diving as well.
Right.
And after that particular holiday, huge amount, I made so many changes in my life that I couldn't even go into it because we'd be talking for an hour.
Yeah.
But it was the start. I mean, when they say life starts at 40, it really does. Well, it did for me anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, big 5-0 on Sunday. I'm seeing my family, which is really nice because my mum lives in Holland, and I see my mum once, maybe twice a year if I'm lucky.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't see her at all for about 2.5 years, nearly 3 years.
Yeah.
During the lockdowns and all of that nonsense, because of not being able to fly, because of not being jabbed, and they're not jabbed, and we had restrictions imposed on us, even though they're now trying to claim that. Anyway, let's not go there.
Yes,
but
it was all,
so I don't see my family that often, and
it was all voluntary.
Oh yeah, no, it was all it was all voluntary.
Yeah. No question.
So yeah, I'm seeing my whole family, and it's, I think the last time we were all together was 6 years ago, probably. So it's going to be good.
Right. Well, thank you very much. Spencer's asking what happened to it after it was photographed. I assume you mean the monster? I don't actually know. Ed, do you know what happened to the monster?
I don't. I think it was carted off
to a secret government establishment.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that it just disappeared.
Okay. So, question for the audience before you slope off, people.
We also have to decide on the next rabbit hole.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true.
We've
got the next rabbit hole to decide. Question for the audience. Are you guys interested in me doing any kind of deep dives into things like I did with the Antarctica thing on my own? Because I've been watching some really mental stuff. And I feel the need to ask people about it, because to me it just seems like really off the wall. But it's always good to have these kind of little chats with people, even though we don't have the actual chat. Julie says sounds good. Militant says yes. So that
Well,
sounds
speaking
good.
for myself, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah,
And
was
you
it?
also mentioned when we were talking over the weekend, you talked about doing some sort of phone in.
Yeah, yeah.
So
The
why
peop-
not? Why not combine the two
Yeah,
ideas?
we could do a phone in as well. Yeah,
And I mean, I
and
don't. To
we'll,
be honest, I don't mind backing you up as well if you want. I mean, it'd be
cool,
quite nice to come
cool.
on and. I mean, obviously, depending on when we do it, I can't
Hmm.
necessarily do every. If you're
Yeah,
thinking Thursdays, you're
yeah.
thinking Thursdays.
Prob possibly. There's a little link for you people. Let's Ed put that on the Philadelphia experiment, the truth about invisibility, teleportation, and other things. But
And
think Thursdays or Tuesdays probably would be the days because
yeah,
we do shows
Tuesday I
other
can't
days.
do.
Yeah, I
But
realise
I mean,
that.
it doesn't stop you from doing it.
Yeah, I know. No, that's cool. That's cool. But that would be quite good. We could do a little impromptu because if you're not having to research it, then you could play my part.
Yeah, for sure. I don't mind doing that at all. That works for me.
So we could actually probably do a weekly, and then we've got we'll just drive this channel through the roof.
Well, I'm up for that. We can certainly see how it goes. I can't guarantee I can do every Thursday, but
Yeah, no,
I certainly
that's
join
fine.
for some of them, and I'd do the first few of them with you.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, right. So, and we were talking about doing a phone in, and because I can give people actual, real British numbers that you can phone that isn't my mobile, so you can actually call us and we can take calls and answer them. So there you go. I think
It's a nice format because not a huge number of the podcasters kind of do that, and we have
Yeah.
Twitter Spaces, but I don't know, the idea of a phone-in radio program is kind of cool.
yeah, it's a bit like we're back to Coast with Art Bell and things like that. We're back in the 90s or the 80s.
But you could do Lock to Haggis with John.
Locked. Like,
Or lock. What is it? Lock, Scotch, and two
smoking barrels. Lock, stock, yeah.
Lock, stock, and two smoking salmon.
Lock, Scotch, and two smoking kippers.
Well, mate,
Lock,
you've got a
Scotch, and
name
two
for this.
smoked kippers. That sounds
Well,
good. That sounds great good.
You've got a name for your show now.
Yeah, lock, Scotch, and two smoked kippers. Yeah, that could work. That could work. Right. Okay.
Hilarious. Cool.
Right. Excellent. That's us then. Thank you very much. I will play the the slightly recut outro, and you'll see there are slightly different scenes in there, and that's us. But thank you very much, Ed. It's been great.
It's
For
been
you.
awesome. Thank you, John.
Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Yo, I got a lot of shit to say, so I'ma do this every day. I'll be writing things until I'm fucking buried in my grave. 6 feet deep under, but my body won't decay. Cause my messages are timeless, so they'll put them on display. Oh yeah, I rap with a certainty, I have a sense of urgency. A message for eternity, for everyone internally. I had some people burning me, but now they fucking learn to see I ain't the one to fuck with. Now they looking nervously, and I don't really care what you think of me respectfully. You can kick rocks if you think you're fucking better, see. I will outwork you, turn you to an enemy. Hurt you so bad that you're gonna need some therapy. I got the motherfucking recipe. I've been cooking up hits, I'ma leave a legacy. You'll be looking small when you're standing right next to me. I'm 5'10", bitch, but I'm 10 feet. Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Yeah, I'ma do it my way. I can't contain it, I'm coming out with a statement. You really changed, man, all your music and arrangement. You don't know shit, shut your mouth, you can save it. I'm the same dude that got his come up from the basement. capture it. You got one life to master it. Don't give up on your future. We all start losers. We're all late bloomers. Gotta struggle through the sewer. What you say? Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks. I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks. I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want